They laughed at the quiet black janitor, calling him trash in uniform. But when his collar slipped, they saw a Navy SEAL tattoo that shouldn't have existed. The room froze. Was he a fraud or had history erased a hero? What happened next silenced the entire gym forever. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The sound of steel plates clanging against each other echoed through the cavernous training gym. The Navy SEAL facility was a place where sweat was currency, and pride was the language spoken most fluently. Dozens of young recruits filled the room, their bodies slick with perspiration, their laughter sharp, their egos taller than the racks of weights stacked against the wall. In the middle of all that fire and bravado moved a man who didn't belong, at least, not in their eyes. Isaiah Cole pushed a wide broom slowly across the polished floor, the bristles hissing as they collected chalk dust, stray tape and protein bar wrappers. The recruits left scattered without thought. His uniform wasn't a uniform at all, just navy blue coveralls, faded and softened by time with maintenance stitched in white across the chest. He was older than the rest of them, his frame solid but hidden beneath fabric that swallowed his build. His skin was dark, his movements quiet, almost reverent. The recruits barely noticed him at first, but as their sets ended and conversation picked up, attention turned toward the man sweeping silently near the squat racks. "Look at him," one of the recruits, a tall blonde named Ryder, muttered just loud enough for the group around him to hear. He leaned back on the bench press, smirking, probably never even stepped foot in a real gym until this job. Now he gets to watch us work. The comment drew a burst of laughter from the others. "Hey man," another chimed in, "maybe he's taking notes, learning how real men train." Their words weren't aimed to be heard by Isaiah, but they carried easily across the open room. He paused mid-sweep, the broom angled like a staff in his hands, then resumed without a word. That silence only fed their cruelty. "Bet he can't even lift the bar," someone else sneered. "Skinny old janitor." "Not even skinny," Ryder corrected. "Look at him. Soft. That's what happens when you spend your life pushing a mop instead of iron." More laughter. Isaiah kept his head down. His expression didn't shift. He'd heard worse in his lifetime, though the sting never dulled. Racism, he had learned, was rarely shouted in his face anymore. It lived in the smirks, the mockery, the undertones, the way people thought they were safe enough to speak freely when a black man in coveralls seemed too powerless to answer back. He moved toward the mats, sweeping chalk into small controlled piles, his posture straight despite the jeers bouncing off the walls around him. The recruits returned to their lifts, but the chuckles lingered. From across the gym, an instructor barked orders at a group running combat drills. The contrast was sharp, shouts of discipline and exertion in one corner, childish cruelty in the other. The gym was supposed to be a crucible, a place where men were hardened, where egos were stripped away in service to something greater. But even here, prejudice had found a foothold. Isaiah finished one section of the floor and leaned the broom against the wall. He reached for a rag and bent to wipe down a patch of sweat that had pooled beneath the pull-up bars. As he crouched, the fabric of his coveralls shifted at the collar, revealing just enough of his neck to show black ink against dark skin. At first, no one noticed. The recruits were too busy spotting each other, flexing, grunting under heavy bars. But then, as Isaiah stood and slung the rag over his shoulder, the tattoo caught the light. It wasn't flashy, not a colorful modern design, but old, bold lines etched deep. The kind of tattoo earned, not chosen from a catalog. Ryder saw it first. His laughter cut short. His eyes narrowed. "What's that?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, but his voice carried. A couple of the others turned. "What's what?" "The ink. On his neck." Ryder tilted his head, squinting. "Looks familiar." The others followed his gaze. Isaiah adjusted his collar unconsciously, tugging the fabric higher, hiding the mark. He turned away, grabbing the broom again, resuming his quiet circuit around the gym floor, as though nothing had happened. But the seed had been planted. "Hold up," one of the recruits said slowly, stepping closer, eyes fixed on the fading glimpse of black lines. "That ain't no regular tattoo. I've seen that before." The group hushed, their laughter dissolving into curiosity. Isaiah's broom moved steadily, each sweep measured, deliberate. He didn't turn around. He didn't answer their stares. For the first time since he had walked in, silence settled over the section of the gym. Not respect, suspicion, not admiration, unease. The recruits exchanged glances. Whatever that tattoo was, It didn't fit with the picture they had painted of Isaiah Cole, the quiet black janitor who swept their floors and collected their trash. The air felt heavier now. The clang of weights from across the gym seemed distant. And then one of the younger recruits whispered, almost under his breath but loud enough for Ryder to hear, "No way. That looks like seal ink." Ryder's head snapped around. "What did you just say?" The younger man didn't answer, his eyes still fixed on Isaiah's neck. He wasn't laughing anymore. Isaiah kept sweeping, the bristles hissing across the floor, his face unreadable. But the room was no longer mocking him. It was watching him. Watching the tattoo he tried to keep hidden. Watching the mystery they had just stumbled into, without realizing the weight of what they were seeing. The broom paused mid-stroke. Isaiah's hand tightened on the handle, his knuckles pale against dark skin. He could feel their eyes burning into him. But he didn't turn around. Not yet. One recruit, his brow furrowed, stepped forward with a look not of ridicule, but of recognition, as if a memory had just sparked. He stared at the tattoo, unsettled, and whispered a name no one else could hear. The laughter from the gym lingered in Isaiah's ears long after his shift ended. Even when he pulled the heavy service door shut behind him and stepped into the cool evening air, their voices clung like smoke, hard to shake off. He carried his work bag over one shoulder, the smell of disinfectant rising faintly from the clothes inside. To the recruits he was invisible, until he became a target. To Isaiah, invisibility was safer than being seen. He walked the few blocks to his apartment building, a squat, aging complex pressed between a liquor store and a pawn shop. The neon signs from both bled through his thin curtains at night, painting the walls in shifting colors. The stairwell creaked as he climbed, the paint on the railing chipped and curling. Apartment 3B. That was home. Inside, silence greeted him. The place was small. One bedroom, one bath, and a kitchen barely big enough for a stove, fridge, and single counter. The furniture was second-hand. A sagging couch, a wooden table, with one uneven leg, and a mattress on a metal frame pushed against the wall. He set his bag down, loosened his collar, and moved through the motions of his nightly routine. Dinner was a can of beans, eaten cold from the tin with a spoon. Not because he couldn't cook, but because it was easier this way. The television flickered faintly in the background. News anchors debating politics he no longer trusted. Commercials selling things he never wanted. Isaiah ate in silence, staring at nothing. Later in the bathroom, the mirror caught him in half-light. He leaned over the sink, splashing cold water onto his face, watching the rivulets slide down his skin. And then for a moment, he turned his head. The collar of his shirt slipped, and the tattoo on his neck came into view. Black ink. Sharp lines. A symbol that meant something only to a select few. He stared at it, jaw tight, eyes hard. His reflection looked back at him. Older than he remembered, heavier somehow. The tattoo was a reminder of everything he once carried, and everything taken from him. He tugged the collar back up, as though hiding it from himself. The apartment seemed to press in around him. That happened sometimes. The walls closing in, the silence too loud. He closed his eyes and drifted, and the past came rushing back without permission. Mississippi. Heat heavy as a blanket. Dust rising in the air when a truck sped past, white faces in the cab, laughter spilling from the windows. He was 10 years old, running barefoot down a dirt road, with his younger brother, clutching a baseball glove someone had given them secondhand. The glove was too big for his hand, but it was a treasure. A rock struck the ground near his feet. Another whizzed past his ear. The laughter from the truck grew sharper. He had heard the word before, that ugly word, but hearing it screamed at him as a child burned something permanent into him. His brother stumbled, nearly fell, but Isaiah grabbed his arm, pulled him along, and they kept running. He learned early what silence meant. Silence was survival. Speak up, and you became a target. Stay quiet, and maybe they would pass you by. Years later, silence followed him north. He took jobs nobody wanted, cleaning kitchens, hauling trash, fixing broken fixtures in buildings where nobody remembered his name. People looked past him, underestimated him, and Isaiah let them. Better to be underestimated than challenged. Better to be ignored than dragged into fights he couldn't win. Yet sometimes, in the late hours, when he stood in front of the mirror and that tattoo stared back at him, a flicker of something surfaced. Not pride exactly, but memory. He had once been more than this. He had once earned respect, if only for a moment. But respect didn't last. Not for men like him. Isaiah sat on the edge of his bed, the springs groaning under his weight. His hand rested on the nightstand where a small box sat, a battered, wooden thing with scratches across its lid. Inside were fragments of a life he no longer spoke about, an old Navy photo folded at the corners, a medal tucked beneath it, and a letter he never answered. He didn't open the box tonight. He only rested his palm against it, as if to feel the past through the wood. The phone on the nightstand vibrated suddenly, its buzz loud in the quiet room. Isaiah froze. Nobody called him. Weeks went by without the phone ringing. His chest tightened. The screen lit up with an unknown number. For a long moment, he just stared. The vibration rattled the wood beneath it. Finally, he reached out, his large, calloused fingers wrapping around the device. He pressed it to his ear but said nothing. On the other end, a voice breathed. Low. Familiar. Isaiah. He gripped the phone tighter but the silence stretched. His throat worked, but no words came out. The voice spoke again. Slower this time. They know. Isaiah's eyes darted to the mirror across the room, to the faint shadow of ink just visible at his collar. The voice on the phone faded into static, then cut out completely, leaving him staring into his own reflection, and into the mark on his skin that refused to stay hidden. Isaiah set the phone down with shaking hands. For the first time in years, fear showed on his face. Whoever had called him knew something about his past, and that meant the recruit's suspicion was only the beginning. The morning after that phone call, Isaiah's face carried a new weight. Sleep had barely touched him. The words "they know" echoed in his head like a drumbeat. He couldn't silence. He walked the short distance back to the SEAL gym, his bag slung over his shoulder, his eyes lowered. The gym roared with life. As always, iron hitting iron, laughter bouncing off high ceilings, sneakers squeaking on mats. But underneath that noise, Isaiah could feel something else now. Eyes, watching him. The tattoo had not been forgotten. If anything, it had grown larger in their minds overnight. Ryder spotted him first. His smirk returned like clockwork. "Morning, Janitor," he said, tossing a towel onto the ground right in Isaiah's path. "Floor's dirty. Better get to it." Isaiah bent without a word, picked up the towel and dropped it into his cart. He had done this job long enough to know that silence was its own shield. But silence could also draw blood. The whispers began. "Man, he's always lurking around. Creepy. Bet he steals protein bars when no one's looking. Nah, he can't afford protein. Dude probably lives on ramen." Laughter. Harmless. To someone on the outside. But Isaiah felt every word like a thorn pressing into skin. He pushed the mop across the slick floor. Steady. Controlled. They wanted him to break. One recruit accidentally kicked over his water bottle, spilling it across the clean tiles. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Guess that's your job, huh? Better get it before someone slips." Another tossed chalk into the air deliberately, letting the powder drift across the floor. "Messy place, huh? You're slacking, man. Earn your paycheck." And then there were the jokes about his clothes. Isaiah's coveralls were faded, stitched at the knee from old tears. The recruits pointed at the patchwork.
"Hey, I didn't know janitors had uniforms."
"Looks like something my granddad would wear in the garden." "You sure that's not a hand-me-down?" Each barb was delivered with laughter sharp enough to cut. Isaiah let none of it show. He kept working, one square of floor at a time, as if the insults were air he couldn't afford to breathe in. But the more silent he was, the bolder they became. Silence, to them, was weakness. By mid-morning, the tension in the gym had shifted. Even those not participating had begun to watch the game unfold. It wasn't about cleaning anymore. It was about seeing how far Isaiah could bend before he snapped. The moment came when Marcus Dean, one of the biggest recruits, clapped his hands together and shouted across the room. His voice carried, drawing attention like a spotlight. "Hey!" Marcus pointed at Isaiah, who was bent near the squat racks. "Real men earn their place in here, not by cleaning trash." The gym fell quiet. Not entirely, but enough. The clang of weights didn't stop, but the rhythm shifted. Ears turned toward the confrontation. Isaiah straightened slowly, his rag still in his hand. His eyes swept the room once, then dropped again. He didn't respond. Marcus grinned, emboldened. "That's right. Nothing to say, huh?" He spread his arms wide, his chest glistening with sweat. "You think just hanging around in this gym makes you one of us? It doesn't. You're a janitor. That's all you'll ever be." Snickers rolled across the mats. A few heads turned away, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak. The hierarchy was clear: recruits at the top, the janitor at the bottom, and no one wanted to risk trading places. Isaiah bent down again, picking up another towel without hurry. His silence was a wall, but inside him, pressure built. Marcus wasn't finished. He walked closer, circling Isaiah like a predator circling prey. "Tell me something, old man. You ever lift anything heavier than that mop of yours? Or you just stick to trash bags and dirty rags?" Isaiah folded the towel neatly, placed it in the bin. His hand lingered there, steady. Ryder chimed in from the bench. "Bet he can't even press the bar." The room broke into laughter again, sharper this time, rising like a wave. A chorus of voices joined in. "Yeah, prove it. Come on, janitor. Show us you got something. Or admit you're just hiding behind that broom." Isaiah finally looked up. His eyes scanned the room, passing over each face, calm but unyielding. The weight of his silence made some recruits glance away, as if they had expected fear, not composure. Marcus leaned closer, his grin spreading. "Come on. Prove you're not just a janitor. Lift something. Right here, right now." The gym seemed to hold its breath. For the first time since Isaiah had set foot in that building, every pair of eyes landed squarely on him. Not with dismissal, but with expectation. Some waited to laugh, others waited to be surprised. All of them waited. Isaiah's gaze flickered, just once, to the barbell resting on the rack nearby. Plates stacked on either side, gleaming under fluorescent lights. His reflection shone faintly in the steel. He said nothing, but his hand shifted. For a moment it looked as though he might walk toward it. And then in the silence a voice cut through the air, not Marcus's, not Ryder's. A younger recruit, quieter than the rest, spoke up. His tone wasn't mocking, it was sharp, uneasy. "Wait," he said, eyes fixed on Isaiah's collar. "Look at his neck." The room froze. The fabric had shifted again. The tattoo peeked out, stark against his skin. And this time the recognition in the recruit's eyes wasn't curiosity. It was fear. The recruit stepped back, his voice cracking as he pointed. "That's not just a tattoo. That's seal ink. Who the hell is he?" The gym hung in silence after the younger recruit's trembling words. "That's seal ink. Who the hell is he?" The laughter that had filled the air, only moments ago, died like a flame snuffed out by wind. For the first time since Isaiah began working there, no one mocked him. Every eye was fixed on the quiet janitor with the tattoo he seemed desperate to hide. Isaiah stood still, broom in one hand, rag in the other, his gaze steady but unreadable. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted this moment. But silence, his shield, had been pierced. Marcus broke the stillness with a scoff, masking his unease.
"Seal ink? Please."
"Anyone can get a tattoo." His tone was loud, meant to rally the others back into laughter. "Doesn't make him a Navy SEAL. Makes him a poser." Some chuckled weakly, eager to fall back into the safety of mockery. But others weren't so sure. The younger recruit's eyes remained locked on Isaiah's neck, his jaw tight. Ryder smirked and grabbed a barbell from the rack. He slapped plates onto it with loud clangs, each one echoing in the quiet room. "You want us to believe you're something more than a janitor?" he said, his voice rising. "Then prove it. Lift this." Marcus nodded, his grin sharpening. "Yeah. Show us you've got anything besides calluses from scrubbing floors." All eyes shifted back to Isaiah. He didn't move at first. He let the weight of their stares sit on him, pressing down like another barbell on his shoulders. His silence spoke louder than words. He had nothing to prove. Not to them, not anymore. But the laughter, the whispers, the way they waited to see him fail, it twisted something inside him. Not pride, not anger, something quieter. A need to show truth, if only once. Isaiah placed the broom gently against the wall. The sound of bristles tapping concrete was enough to make the recruits lean forward, anticipation swelling. He stepped toward the barbell Ryder had loaded. The metal gleamed beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, the plates heavy, intimidating to anyone untrained. He lowered himself slowly, his knees bending, his hands finding the knurled grip with precision. His fingers wrapped around the steel like they had done 1,000 times before, though none of these men knew it. For a moment, the room held its breath. Isaiah inhaled. His chest rose, steady, controlled. Then he lifted. The bar came off the ground in one fluid motion, no grunt, no strain, his back straight, his core locked, his arms steady. He held it as if it weighed nothing more than the mop he carried every day. Gasps rippled through the gym.
What the?
Holy, he's not even shaking. That's perfect form. He didn't slam the bar back down. He lowered it slowly, controlled, letting the plates kiss the floor without sound. He rose to his full height again, the faint sheen of sweat catching the light. For the first time they saw his body clearly. Beneath the coveralls, beneath the years of silence, muscle memory had never left him. His frame wasn't bulky like theirs, built for it was carved by discipline, by years of training that had nothing to do with gym culture, and everything to do with survival. Ryder's smirk faltered. Marcus shifted his weight, jaw tightening. Isaiah reached up, wiped the back of his neck with his rag. In doing so, his collar slipped further. The tattoo came into view in full. No one laughed this time. It was unmistakable now. Black ink, faded but strong, the trident symbol that only those who had endured the brutal crucible of SEAL training could bear. Not a copy, not a fake, a mark that could only be earned through blood, sweat, and survival most men could never imagine. The younger recruit whispered, almost reverently, "That's real. My uncle was a SEAL. I've seen that tattoo before. You don't get it unless..." His voice trailed off, but the implication was enough. Unless you were one of them. The gym shifted again. Unease crept into the room, swallowing the bravado that had filled it. The laughter that once targeted Isaiah now turned inward, choking the men who had mocked him. Isaiah pulled his collar back up, covering the ink. He bent, picked up his broom again, and resumed sweeping as if nothing had happened. That, more than anything, unsettled them. He had just lifted their challenge with ease, revealed a mark tied to legends they only dreamed of becoming, and then returned to silence, to sweeping, as though their taunts meant nothing. The recruits exchanged glances. Some were ashamed, others defensive, but all were shaken. And then, just as the room buzzed with murmurs, the gym door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, older, weathered, his posture straight as a blade, despite his age. His presence alone commanded attention. Conversations cut short, weights lowered carefully. It was retired Chief Instructor Walter Briggs, a man whose reputation carried through every SEAL class. He had trained hundreds, maybe thousands of men, who wore the trident. His visits to the gym were rare, but when they happened, recruits snapped to attention. Except this time he didn't look at them. His eyes landed on Isaiah, and froze. The color drained from Briggs's face. His mouth parted slightly, disbelief written across features that rarely betrayed emotion. For a man known to bark orders and show no weakness, the shock was unmistakable. The recruits noticed instantly. If Briggs reacted this way, it meant something. Something big. Isaiah, broom in hand, didn't turn. He kept sweeping, the bristles whispering against the floor, but his shoulders stiffened, the only sign that he knew he'd been recognized. Briggs's voice broke the silence, not in command, but in a whisper only a few nearby could hear. "Dear God, it's him." The whisper left Chief Briggs's mouth like a confession. "Dear God, it's him." For the recruits, those words deepened the mystery. For Isaiah, they opened a door he had worked years to keep sealed. Memories, long buried, pressed against his mind like floodwater against a dam. He gripped the broom tighter, his knuckles whitening, but the pressure broke through anyway. The gym around him seemed to fade. The clang of iron dissolved. The smell of sweat and chalk gave way to salt water and diesel. And suddenly Isaiah was 20 again, standing beneath a wide Mississippi sky. Back then he was leaner but no less strong, his eyes sharper, unclouded by the years. The South had taught him silence, but it had also taught him hunger. Hunger for more than what was given to men who looked like him. He worked fields, odd jobs, anything to bring in money, but opportunity always came with a closed door. The Navy had been his way out. Recruiters in pressed uniforms had spoken of travel, brotherhood, a chance to carve out a future on equal footing. Isaiah had signed without hesitation. His mother's worried face, the last thing he remembered before stepping onto the bus that carried him away from the dust roads of Mississippi. Training hit him like a storm. The first week stripped men of pride and broke them down to nothing. Isaiah endured it silently, as he had endured everything in his life. Push-ups in the sand until his arms failed. Sprints across endless beaches until his lungs burned. Drills in freezing surf until his body shook uncontrollably. He never complained. He never quit. But silence could not shield him from everything. Even among recruits, the old divisions followed. Some called him country boy. Others let slurs slip in whispers, thinking he wouldn't hear over the roar of waves and barked commands. Instructors turned blind eyes to it, so long as Isaiah didn't break discipline. He swallowed it all, the way he had on Mississippi roads when trucks slowed to hurl words sharper than stones. What saved him, and what set him apart was his resilience. Where others cursed the water and begged for warmth, Isaiah let the cold settle into his bones. Where others shouted back at insults, he pressed forward in silence. Weeks turned into months. The faces around him thinned. Men stronger than him in muscle failed in spirit. But Isaiah endured. He remembered the night most clearly. Hell Week, when recruits were pushed to the brink of human endurance. 5 days with barely any sleep, endless drills, relentless physical strain. Men hallucinated. Men quit. Men wept. Isaiah stayed. His body screamed for rest, but his silence carried him. His instructors noticed. Not his race, not his background, just his refusal to break. When it was done, when his body collapsed on the sand after the final drill, he heard words he would never forget. A gruff voice above him, one of the senior instructors. Cole, you earned it. The tattoo came later, a trident inked into his neck, not for decoration but for survival. A permanent mark that told the world he had passed where most had failed. It was not given lightly, and it was never faked. Isaiah should have found peace there, among men who had survived the same fire. But camaraderie was fractured. Brotherhood had limits. Behind closed doors the whispers followed him. He was the first in his unit who looked like him, and some men resented that. Still, Isaiah served. Missions blurred into each other. Nights dropped into hostile waters. Days moving unseen through enemy territory. Moments where silence wasn't just survival, but necessity. He carried his brothers home, sometimes alive, sometimes not. He never complained, never boasted. Then came the betrayal. It didn't happen on the field. It happened in the shadows, where paper and power carried more weight than grit. A commanding officer, a man Isaiah had once trusted, began erasing him. Missions where Isaiah had led quietly. His name vanished from records. Commendations he had earned were reassigned to others. Isaiah noticed only when the medals he should have received never came. When ceremonies were held and he stood at the back, his role unmentioned, his presence unacknowledged. When younger, wider recruits were promoted above him with achievements that bore his fingerprints but not his name. At first he thought it was a mistake, then he realized it was deliberate. One night, he confronted the officer in private. The man's response was calm, chilling. "You don't belong in the history books, Cole. Be grateful you're even here." Isaiah said nothing. He walked out of the room, his silence louder than shouting ever could have been. He kept serving, but the weight grew heavier. Each mission he returned from, each scar he carried, reminded him that he was being erased in real time. The tattoo on his neck marked him as one of them, but the system ensured no one would remember. And then, one day, he was gone. No ceremony, no farewell, no explanation. Isaiah Cole walked away from the SEALs, from the career he had fought to build, from the brothers he had bled beside. He left with silence as his only companion, carrying a truth too heavy to speak. The memory faded. The gym came back into view. The recruits still stared at him. Chief Briggs still stood frozen, his eyes locked on Isaiah like he was seeing a ghost. Isaiah leaned on his broom, his posture calm, but inside, the storm of memory still raged. Briggs took one step forward, his voice unsteady. "Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't walk away." Chief Briggs's whisper still hung in the air, fragile, stunned, when he seemed to remember the room he was standing in. His back straightened, his eyes flicked from Isaiah to the ring of recruits waiting for a verdict. For a breath it looked as if he would say the man's name, give the room the truth it suddenly craved. Instead he cleared his throat and let the authority slide back over his face like a visor. "Carry on," Briggs said, voice neutral. "Focus on your programming." A ripple of confusion passed through the recruits. Marcus's mouth curled. Ryder's smirk returned like a bad habit. The younger recruit who'd first recognized the ink, Eli Navarro, stared at Briggs as if the old man had swallowed a truth and chosen to choke on it. Isaiah lowered his gaze and eased the broom back into his hands. He had learned this rhythm long ago, a recognition offered, then snatched away to keep the world tidy. The bristles whispered across the floor. The gym's noise climbed back to its usual volume, but the texture of it had changed, less laughter, More calculation. The rumors started as soon as Briggs stepped out. He faked that tattoo, Ryder said near the dumbbell rack, loud enough to travel. You can buy anything online if you want it bad enough. Or he stole it, someone else added from the cable machine. Saw a story like that once. Guy copied a unit badge to impress girls. Eli shook his head. That's not how. Marcus cut him off, flexing in the mirror. Relax, Eli. Old man wants attention. That's all this is. Isaiah moved through it, gathering towels, righting a toppled trash can. Silence folded neat as a sheet. He could feel the words following him. Cheap, sticky, meant to cling. By noon, the jokes sharpened into assertions stated as fact. 3 recruits leaned near the water station, stage whispering so the sound would carry. Bet he was never on a team, said the tallest, a freckled kid named Nolan. He was probably a cook, or a base janitor. Makes sense he never left the mop. The others laughed, the kind that begged for agreement. A few glanced at Isaiah to see if he flinched. He didn't. He had learned to let words pass through him. But he still felt the sting on the way in. In the locker hallway, a piece of printer paper appeared on the bulletin board above the cleaning schedule. 4 words in block letters. Stolen ink, stolen honor. Someone had drawn a crude trident next to it, like a dare. No signature, just a shadow's courage. Who put that up? Eli asked, voice tight. No one answered. A few shoulders lifted. A few grins widened and then smoothed. Isaiah took the paper down without comment. He folded it twice, set it in the bottom of his cart, and went to scrub a chalky handprint someone had planted deliberately on the glass door. He could sense eyes tracking his every motion, inventorying the way he chose dignity over argument. Cole, called Evelyn Grayson, the facility manager, from the office doorway. She wore a tidy polo and a careful tone. Quick word? He followed her into the cramped office. The blinds were half closed, sunlight striping the floor. I'm getting complaints, Evelyn said, tapping the desk with a capped pen. Nothing major, just comments about attitude. Apparently you're making some of the guys uncomfortable. Isaiah kept his face still. How so, ma'am? She glanced at her screen, as if the specifics might materialize there. Staring. Taking too long to clean certain areas. Being territorial with equipment storage. The way she quoted the word betrayed skepticism. But policy was its own tide. You know I value you here. We just have to keep the temperature low. I understand, Isaiah said. If anything escalates, bring it to me, Evelyn added. And maybe keep the collar up. You know how rumors get. He held her gaze a second longer, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. When he stepped back out, a towel slid off a bench onto the floor, and no one bothered to pick it up. A shaker bottle took a casual dive near his feet. A chalk bag accidentally exploded in his path, white dust settling over his shoes like fresh snow. A smear of peanut butter appeared on the handle of his cart like a child's idea of mischief. Except these were grown men training to be elite. Careful, Ryder said as Isaiah wiped the handle clean, his tone sugary. Wouldn't want you to slip. Eli drifted closer, low voice barely audible beneath the clank and thud. You all right, sir? Isaiah didn't look up. Do your work. Eli swallowed. Yes, sir. In the weight room mirror, Isaiah caught a glimpse of himself. Collar high, shoulders square, jaw set the way a man sets a door against a storm. He turned away from his reflection, before it could start a conversation he wasn't ready to have. The group chat lit up that afternoon. Phones buzzing on benches, blue bubbles firing fast. Nolan, anyone find proof on the janitor? Ryder. Google says Trident Tat is easy to fake. Marcus. All cap old man's a fraud. Eli, y'all are talking about someone you don't know. Ryder. Big talk, Eli. You want him to adopt you. Nolan. Law. Screens dimmed as sets resumed. Screens brightened as sets ended. By evening, someone had stuck another page on the board. A grainy printout of a trident pulled from a search engine, blurry on cheap paper, as if to say, see, truth, reduced to pixelation and spite. Isaiah kept moving. He vacuumed the corners. Others pretended not to see. He refilled the paper towel rolls they emptied twice, as fast as usual. He swept past an open door and paused, not for rest, but because he heard a familiar voice. Chief Briggs. No, I'm not confirming anything. Briggs said into his phone, his back to the hall. The past is the past. Leave it. A beat. I said leave it. Isaiah stepped away, before the call ended. Briggs emerged a moment later, eyes flicking to Isaiah, then away. The older man opened his mouth, then shut it. His hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he adjusted his cap. "Afternoon, Chief," Isaiah said, voice even. Briggs swallowed. "Afternoon, Mr. Cole." The formality sounded like a shield. He kept walking. The unexpected twist landed like a quiet blow. The one man who could have ended the rumors had chosen not to. The vacuum of his silence pulled the room's worst instincts into it. By late day, the cruelty refined itself into administrative edges. A random locker inspection left Isaiah's small closet in disarray. His spare shirt tossed to the floor. A notice from procurement claimed his supply usage was excessive and subject to review. Someone lodged a complaint about unsafe cleaning chemicals. Though Isaiah's kit hadn't changed in months, it was death by paper cuts, no bruise to photograph, no scar to point at, just the steady erasure that he knew too well. Eli found him alone in the corridor, retying a trash liner with the careful precision of a sailor knotting rope. "They're going to keep pushing," Eli said, shame in his eyes that didn't belong to him. "I heard Marcus talking about taking this to command. He wants you gone." Isaiah's fingers paused, then finished the knot. "Winds change," he said softly. "We stand." Eli frowned. "You shouldn't have to stand alone." Isaiah lifted the bag, the plastic whispering like surf. "Go train." When the day's final circuit ended, the gym thinned out, one group stretching, another drifting toward the showers. Isaiah rolled his cart toward the locker room, intending to restock soap and check drains. As he pushed through the door, sound met him. A television mounted high in the corner, volume low, captions marching across the screen. Heritage Week, the network banner read. Frogmen, UN Sung Operations. Most of the recruits ignored it. Documentaries rarely had enough adrenaline for men who chased it hourly. Eli, however, stood near the benches, towel around his shoulders, eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't notice Isaiah enter. The program cut from an interview to black and white photographs that bled into grainy color footage. A team on a pitching deck at night. Gloved hands checking gear, faces blurred by salt and darkness. A narrator spoke of a mission that was once classified and now half told. Names omitted. Coordinates smudged. The camera lingered on a line of men kneeling near the stern, each tightening a strap, each caught in the wash of a red light. Isaiah's breath left him, quiet as a leak in a hull. The next image filled the whole frame. A man on a beach at dawn. Shoulders bowed under the weight of a pack, and something heavier slung across his back. A body limp but held with care. The rescuer's face turned toward the lens for a second. The photographer likely hadn't planned to capture sunlight hit the angle of his cheek, the set of his mouth, the faint unmistakable mark at the base of his neck. Eli stepped closer to the screen, as if proximity could change what he saw. "Hold up," Ryder said from the doorway, half laughing. "They all look the same in those suits." Eli didn't turn. "No. Look." His voice trembled. "Look." The room's attention shifted, drawn by the certainty in the kid's tone. Marcus crossed his arms, jaw hard. The footage froze on the rescuer's face as the narrator's audio faded between segments, a glitch of timing that felt designed by fate. The tattoo on the man's neck was visible in the grain, a trident, faded by years even then, inked on skin darker than the rest of the team's. The face was younger, but the line of the jaw, the steadiness in the eyes, the way he bore the weight that wasn't his own. Eli whispered, barely breathing. "That's him." Isaiah stood at the edge of the benches, the cart handle under his hand. The smell of bleach suddenly sharp, every sound in the locker room dulled to a hum. He watched the image that had been buried by time throw light across a present that wanted to deny it. The screen cut to a talking head, an officer whose name was bleeped, saying, "Some stories are complicated." Eli turned toward Isaiah, eyes wide with something like reverence and fear interlaced. Marcus's face had lost a shade of color. Ryder's mouth was open, words crowded behind his teeth, and finding no exit. Before anyone could speak, the documentary flicked to the next segment. A team roster card with a blank, where a name should have been. The caption read, "Identity expunged by order of command." Eli looked from the empty line to Isaiah, and the room felt the floor tilt. Who had erased the name? And why? The locker room air felt charged, as if the caption on the television, "Identity expunged by order of command," had pulled a wire tight through everyone's chest. No one spoke first. They watched the image of the nameless rescuer dissolve into a map with blank coordinates and dates blurred like smudged fingerprints. Then the murmurs began, low and defensive. The way people talk when what they've believed about themselves is suddenly at stake. It can't be him, Nolan said, folding his arms hard enough to show strain. That footage is, what, decades old? Our janitor's pushing 60. Faces change, Eli replied, voice steady but thin with adrenaline. Eyes don't. Look at the eyes. Ryder snorted. Bro, it's a documentary. They edit this stuff to make a story. Could be anyone under that helmet. Could be staged. Across the benches, Marcus stared at the screen as if he could bully pixels into rearranging. This is exactly how myths get made. One guy sees a blurred tattoo. Suddenly we're crowning a custodian as a war legend. The word landed like a slap, soft in volume but hard in meaning. Custodian. Not man. Not veteran. Custodian. Isaiah stood near the end of the row, one hand on his cart's handle, still as tied at slack. If he felt their words, he did not let it show. He watched the TV the way a man watches smoke curl from a fire he already knows the cause of. From the doorway, boots scuffed tile. Chief Briggs stepped in, drawn by the crowd or the noise, or his own conscience tugging. He looked from the screen to Isaiah, from Isaiah to the recruits. Something in him had shifted since the morning. The mask of distance had slipped an inch.
What's going on in here? He asked, though he could see it.
Ryder gestured at the screen. They're trying to say that's him. He didn't say Isaiah's name, as if names granted ground. Briggs's gaze returned to the paused frame. The young man on a dawn beach, burdened by a brother's weight, sunlight catching the corner of his face. For a beat, the retired instructor's expression was naked with memory. Then he stepped forward and reached up, pressing the remote's mute button to punch the room into silence. He took a breath that sounded like it scraped on old coral. That's Isaiah Cole, he said, each word measured. One of the toughest men I ever trained. The statement rang against tile and metal, and pride. Eli's shoulders dropped, as if permission to believe had just been issued. Nolan's mouth worked and found no shape. Ryder laughed once, empty of humor. Marcus didn't move. You sure, Chief? His tone wore politeness like a plastic badge, because that's a serious claim to make about a staff member. Briggs turned, slow and deliberate. I'm sure. I watched him crawl through surf with hypothermia gnawing his bones. I watched him carry men twice his size when other men's legs quit. I watched him say nothing while others made noise. The old man's voice softened, not with pity but respect. He earned the trident the way it's supposed to be earned. Ryder's jaw tightened. Then why isn't his name on anything? Briggs hesitated, just enough for the question to bloom. His eyes flickered toward Isaiah, and back. Not every story gets written down right, he said finally.
That's convenient, Marcus replied. He gets to be a legend and a ghost, all at once.
Eli looked between them, frustration rising. You all have been calling him a fraud, all day. Look at him. He hasn't said a word. He didn't ask for this. Silence doesn't make you honest, Nolan muttered. Sometimes it just makes you slippery. Isaiah lifted his gaze to the screen, and then to Briggs. Chief, he said softly. The first time that day he'd addressed the retired instructor in front of others. You don't owe me anything.
Briggs bristled. You served. That's not a debt, that's a fact.
Ryder rolled his eyes. We gonna throw him a parade now? Should we polish his cart while we're at it? The cruelty came dressed as humor, but its intention showed at the seams. Keep him small. Keep him in the role that made their world orderly. In the mirror above the sinks, Isaiah's collar had slipped just enough for the trident to ghost the edge of view. Eli noticed and moved instinctively, stepping closer to angle his body, so the symbol was covered by a shadow. It was a small act, invisible to most, and it made something old and heavy lift a fraction from Isaiah's chest. The documentary unmuted itself at the end of the segment, and rolled on. A still flashed a page from a historical summary. Redactions blacking out lines like a censor's blackout poetry. Near the bottom, a rubber stamp bled gray. Ordered withheld sec. Beneath that, a signature flickered into clarity for 2 frames, just long enough for the eye to catch it. Ardeen, CO. Then it cut away to waves. Eli blinked. Wait, did you see that? He fumbled with the remote, bit awkward, stabbed back 10 seconds. Paused on the document. He squinted. Ardeen. Ryder shrugged. Could be any Dean. Marcus said nothing, but a muscle twitched in his cheek. Someone in the background said, Marcus, your dad served, right? It was too casual to be innocent. My father's years are none of your business, Marcus said, voice flat as steel. The hairline crack in his composure traveled outward like frost. Chief Briggs's eyes landed on the name, then on Marcus, then elsewhere, somewhere that wasn't the room because the past was crowding it. He exhaled through his nose. Lots of deans in the Navy, he said, but it didn't sound like belief. It sounded like mercy. The unexpected twist had folded itself into the scene, without theatrics. A surname linking command to the blank on the ledger. It didn't prove anything by itself. It didn't have to. Doubt had its own gravity. In the minutes that followed, the recruits divided without needing to be told which side they were on. A few drifted toward Isaiah with eyes that apologized without words. One said, halting, "Mr. Cole, I earlier," and trailed into a swallow, the sentence unfinished but understood. Another simply picked up the towel he'd dropped that morning and folded it square, the smallest kind of restitution. Others doubled down, not because the evidence favored them, but because the alternative demanded they admit something about the world and themselves that was too heavy to lift. Nolan shook his head, half to himself. This is politics. It's always politics. They put guys like him up front now to make us look inclusive. Eli bristled. Guys like him? You know what I mean, Nolan said, which was the problem. Ryder leaned against the lockers, arms crossed, voice pitched to Carrie. We train here to become the best. I won't have the standard diluted by a story somebody chose to tell. He tipped his chin at Isaiah's cart. If he wanted respect, he should have earned it the proper way, not by mopping a floor near us and letting rumors do push-ups. Isaiah's face remained composed, but tiredness gathered at the corners of his eyes, as if each barbed sentence added a year. He turned the cart, intending to leave the center of the storm, to return to work that didn't argue back. Chief Briggs stepped half into his path, not to block him, but to stand beside him. Mr. Cole, Briggs said, tone formal by design. For whatever it's worth, you were square. I should have said it sooner. Isaiah searched the old man's face. You said it now. It wasn't absolution. It was acknowledgement, thin but real. Briggs looked as if he wanted to say more, the kind of more that would be confession, but command habits tightened his jaw. He settled for a nod, and turned to the recruits. Men, you can train to lift weight, or you can train to carry it. Those are not the same. Marcus pushed off the lockers, taking a step into open space, the way men do when they decide where the next line will be drawn. The room adjusted around him. Influence creates its own architecture. Enough, he said. This isn't a debate club. We're not going to let a hallway TV rewrite the standard. He pointed, not at the screen, not at the tattoo, but at the idea of Isaiah. Anyone can tell a story. Anyone can claim a past no one can verify. Eli met his eyes. Chief Briggs just did verify it. Chief Briggs gave an opinion. Marcus replied. You want to call it certainty? Go ahead. He turned slightly, head angled so his voice fell on as many ears as possible. I'm not going to live with ambiguity. This unit demands clarity. What are you going to do? Nolan asked, hunger creeping into curiosity. Marcus's gaze cut to Isaiah, cool and clinical. Excellence audits itself, he said. If Mr. Cole is who some of you want to believe he is, the record will show it. If he's not, we'll expose it. Briggs's brow furrowed. That's not your lane, son. With respect, Chief, Marcus said, the phrase used as a slide rather than a sign of respect. Standards are everyone's lane. Eli took half a step forward, restraint in every line of his body. What does that mean? It means, Marcus said calmly, almost pleasantly, I'm going to make a few calls. Records, contacts, freedom of information requests. If I have to, I'll talk to the right people, the ones who know what's real. We're going to find out who he is. He smiled then, and it didn't reach his eyes. Or who he isn't. The room seemed to tilt again. Even those who'd sided with Marcus flinched at the coldness dressed as procedure. Isaiah didn't blink. If anything, a strange calm settled over him. The kind men wear on Nightwater when they have learned that storms can't be outrun. Only outlasted. Chief Briggs opened his mouth to object, then closed it. There was a shadow there, regret, maybe. Fear of what the search might dig up about more than one man. Isaiah turned the cart and moved toward the door, reclaiming the simple dignity of a task. The mop bucket sloshed, the sound small and human against all the grand talk. As he passed Marcus, the recruit's voice brushed his shoulder without physically touching him. This place is about earned truths, Marcus said, just loud enough. If you've got one, it'll stand up to light. Isaiah didn't look back. Light doesn't always fall where it should, he said almost to himself. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, thumb already scrolling to a contact labeled with a single letter. I'll have answers by morning, he murmured, eyes on Isaiah's back. And if this is a lie, I'll end it. The gym after hours was a different creature, without the constant clang of iron and overlapping voices. Its vastness echoed with an uneasy quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pale against the stillness. Shadows stretched long across the mats. The smell of chalk lingered, mixed with the faint sting of disinfectant. Isaiah's doing as he finished his nightly rounds. He moved methodically, the mop sliding across the floor, the bristles of a broom set aside. For him, this was routine. Order restored the world, even in small patches of polished tile. But he wasn't alone. Marcus Dean stepped out from the corner by the squat racks, his sweatshirt hood pushed back, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He had waited until the others cleared out, until the showers steamed empty, until Isaiah thought the night was his. Funny thing about light, Marcus said, echoing Isaiah's words from earlier. His voice carried in the empty space. Harsh, metallic. It shows everything, no shadows left to hide in. Isaiah didn't look up. He wrung out the mop, water dripping into the bucket with a hollow plunk. Shouldn't you be gone by now? Marcus smirked, stepping closer. Can't leave. Not while there's a fraud parading around in my gym. The words were calculated, chosen for bite. Marcus circled as he spoke, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the floor. You've got everyone fooled. A janitor with a story. A tattoo you probably begged for, or maybe stole from someone who actually earned it. And that video? Conveniently blurred, conveniently nameless. You think people are that easy to fool? Isaiah pushed the mop forward, the sound whispering between them. He didn't answer. His silence was a wall Marcus couldn't climb, which only enraged him further. You walk around here like you're above it all. Marcus continued. His voice rose, bouncing off the walls. You don't say anything. You don't defend yourself. You just let other people build your legend for you. That's not strength. That's cowardice. He stopped in front of Isaiah, inches away. His size was meant to intimidate. Broad shoulders, squared stance, chest puffed out like he was on parade. He expected Isaiah to step back, to shrink, to break eye contact. Isaiah only dipped the mop again, sweeping around Marcus's shoes as if the young man were just another obstacle in his path. That indifference lit Marcus's fuse. You think silence makes you noble? His voice cracked, frustration lacing his words. No, silence makes you small. A real SEAL speaks with his actions, his record, his brothers. And guess what? Your name isn't anywhere. You don't exist. Isaiah's hands stilled on the mop handle, but he didn't rise to the bait. His breathing was steady, his gaze downward. Marcus leaned in closer, his whisper harsh. You're nothing but a janitor who wanted to be remembered. And I'm not going to let this place bow down to a lie. The escalation came not in fists but in presence. Marcus's voice sharpened. His words turned to blades, slicing at the man's dignity. Tell me, old man, what's the truth? Were you a cook? A cleaner even then? Did you polish boots for the real warrior? Or did you just stand on the shore while better men bled in the surf? Isaiah's grip on the mop handle tightened, his knuckles widening. His chest rose slowly, controlled. He still refused to answer. Marcus slammed his palm against the wall beside Isaiah's head, the thud reverberating through the quiet gym. Say something, he barked. Isaiah turned, calm, his eyes level. His silence carried weight, not weakness, not fear, but something heavier Marcus hadn't expected. It unnerved him. So Marcus raised his fist. His arm hovered, tense, the shadow of violence spilling across Isaiah's face. It wasn't about hitting him. It was about proving he could, about showing dominance, about reminding everyone, even in an empty gym, who had the power. Isaiah didn't flinch. He stood straight, the mop still in his hand, his shoulders squared like a man standing in surf against the pull of a tide. The stillness stretched. The silence between them grew unbearable. Marcus's fist hung there, trembling with rage, with the need to provoke, to win. Finally, Isaiah looked him in the eyes. There was no anger there, no fear, just a steady calm that stripped away Marcus's bravado. Isaiah's voice was low, even, carrying the kind of weight born only of experience. He spoke a single sentence. and Marcus's face drained of color, his hand lowering slowly, as if the words themselves had struck harder than any blow could. The words weren't revealed, only Marcus's stunned expression, frozen between defiance and dread, as Isaiah turned back to his mop, leaving the air thick with unanswered questions. The empty gym held its breath. Marcus's fist hung in the air, the threat of it louder than the act would have been. Isaiah lifted his eyes, calm and unblinking, and let the words leave him like a slow tide rolling over stone. I buried men stronger than you. The sentence did not rush. It landed with the weight of a folded flag. Marcus flinched as if someone else had spoken. Someone older than both of them. Someone who didn't care about pecking orders or mirrors. What did you say? Marcus whispered, but the strength had drained from the question. Isaiah didn't repeat himself. The mop water rippled once, then settled. He turned, wrung out the strings, and pushed the bucket toward the far mat, with the steady patience of a man who had measured worse nights by colder seas. Marcus stepped back as if the air had become too thin to breathe. He straightened, then couldn't quite hold the pose. The room gave the smallest swell and dip in his vision, the first time he'd felt off balance in a place he thought belonged to him. You talk like that because you think it scares me, he said, finding a sliver of volume. It doesn't. Isaiah's answer was unadorned. It's not a threat. What is it then? Memory. The words sketched a doorway in the silence, and on the other side of it, the past waited. It was not a war story the way people like to hear them. There were no soaring speeches, no slow-motion heroics backed by horns. In Isaiah's mind, it began with small things: the stink of neoprene and salt, the scratch of a tag against skin, the drone of rotors swallowed by distance. Night wrapped the water in a cold slick, red light washed the deck. Men moved in practiced quiet. Cole, you tight? A voice had asked through the hiss of comms, those years ago. Tight, he'd said, and the word meant more than ready. It meant complete. They hit the surf as a dark piece of weather. Black water slapped and reached, trying to peel them apart. The shore crouched in a thin gray line without features, as if the world had been erased and penciled back in with a shaking hand. They were there to collect one pilot and one intelligence package, and leave footprints only the sea could read. What came instead was noise, radio chatter breaking into shrieks, an unexpected patrol vomiting light onto the beach, the skirl of rounds carving the air just wrong. Contact left, someone said calmly, because panic wastes oxygen. Push through, the team lead answered, because the plan doesn't love you enough to change itself. They moved. Isaiah's breath measured seconds. His training paired every choice to yes or no, forward or stop. The first scream was short. The second was not a scream at all, just the sound a body makes when it falls wrong. Isaiah turned and found Travis Boone Harrelson, the big man from Tennessee who'd once laughed too hard at a joke that wasn't funny, face down and very still. Boone! Isaiah dropped into a crouch that put his heart near the sand. The dark around them refused to hold still. He pulled Boone to him, rolled him over, saw the wound, and understood a terrible math. There was no time, and he would make time anyway. Leave him, the lead ordered, voice narrowing to a point. Cole, move. Isaiah hooked his hands under Boone's arms. He comes with me. The words tasted like salt and metal. You'll slow us. I won't. He carried Boone the way he carried weight. He hated, balanced close, a man-shaped future strapped across his spine. Every step erased distance and added it back. In the narratives that get told on stages, this is where the music would swell. In Isaiah's memory, the ocean hissed its same indifferent song. They reached the exfil marker late, and alive, and Boone was neither. Isaiah lowered him to the deck with a care no one else had time for. He tied the tag to the boot, the one thing that would not be lost in transit. He held a palm against the cooling shoulder of a man who had once called him boy in a moment that had passed for humor. At the time, Isaiah had said nothing. He said nothing now, too. It felt like a consistency the world could not corrupt. Cole, the medic said. I need. Isaiah stood and gave the medic his body to patch, and later gave the report without commentary. His section was clean, spare, unadorned with grievance, unburdened by compliments to himself. The lead put a period where there should have been a comma. When the paperwork made its way upward, one name, duplicated into 3 right where Isaiah's should have been. The after-action brief credited decisive team coordination for the retrieval of the downed pilot. The word-bearer did not appear, neither did Boone more than twice. Weeks later, back at base, Isaiah stood under a white tent while a chaplain said sentences that sounded like they had been ironed. Boone's mother sobbed into a square of fabric that could not hold all of it. A folded flag unfolded in someone else's hands, then folded again the right way. Isaiah watched from the third row, the place where eyes slide off you. No one handed him a medal. No one mentioned his back where the bruises bloomed in the shape of another man's weight. When he left the service, he took nothing new. No certificate to frame. No clasp for a ribbon he wasn't allowed to wear. He took the tattoo, and even that he covered when it threatened to speak for him. He buried all of it. The way he'd buried men, with care, with silence, without asking permission. Back in the gym, the echo of that history moved through the fluorescent light like a draft you can't source. Marcus swallowed hard. The fist he'd raised sank to his side. "You want me to be impressed?" he asked, trying for contempt and finding only volume. "You want me to feel small?" Isaiah looked at him the way a man looks at water to read wind. "Feel what you feel." "Those words," Marcus said, almost pleading now. "You meant them to put me in my place." Isaiah shook his head. "I meant them to remind you where I stood." Marcus scoffed, but the sound broke. He turned away too quickly, the need to leave tripping over the need to win. "This isn't over," he said, voice finding shape again, as he walked backward toward the exit. "Stories are cheap, facts are not." When he was gone, the gym filled up with its regular quiet. Isaiah finished the floor and checked the locks and rolled his cart into the supply closet. He stood there a long moment among the paper towels and bleach, the small things that kept a place clean, and let the memory place its cool hand on his back before stepping away. Marcus's car sat under the sodium lamp, like a held breath. He slid behind the wheel and stared through the windshield, without seeing. His phone lay on the passenger seat, screen dark. He touched it the way some men touch a rosary, when they need answers more than comfort. He opened a browser and typed Navy SEAL Trident tattoo verification and closed it again immediately, because he was not another idiot Googling symbols. He went instead to the credentialed portal he told himself he had access to by right of belonging. The alumni network, the unofficial channels that cross-wired commands and class years. He sent a message to a contact labeled with a single letter. "Need your eyes on something." He attached a still frame from the documentary, The Red Light Deck, the man whose face refused to be grain and guesswork. The three dots appeared, vanished, appeared. "Why are you asking about this?" The period was a finger on a chest. "Because there's a man here claiming." "No one is claiming." "Stop." Marcus's thumb hovered. He typed, "I think it's Isaiah Cole." This time the reply was not text. His phone rang, the kind of ring that takes precedence. He stared at the name and let it fill the car until answering was the only way to shut it up. "Who told you that name?" The voice on the line was low, measured, and full of bad weather. "I saw a film." A retired chief recognized him. "The janitor here." "Marcus." The voice cut in, gentle on the surface, steel underneath. "Drop it." "I won't. If he's a fraud, it matters. If he's not?" The question held more than curiosity. It held a door closed. "If he's not," Marcus said, "then why is his name missing?" A pause breathed like a cold wind through a vent. "Sometimes omissions are necessary." "For what?" "Operational security." Marcus laughed once, ugly. "We're talking about history, not coordinates. Why does a person get erased?" "Because someone thought that was best," the voice said. "And because they could." The call ended without a goodbye. Marcus sat with the phone in his lap and felt the gravity shift. He tried another angle. He filed a formal records request through an official channel, couched in the bland language of process, seeking clarification on unit personnel associated with operation. He left the code name blank, because he didn't have it. The request pinged back with an auto reply. "Received. Estimated response pending." He did not wait. Waiting is not what men do when they smell risk. He drove to the base library, badge flashing him past the guard desk, and into a room where the air felt 12 degrees cooler than the hallway. He flipped through bound Navinins no one touched anymore, pulled microfilm like pulling thread, fed a machine with strips of past. Names rolled by, citations, assignments, reassignments. He found a mission summary with an error too tidy to be an error. 3 recipients for 2 actions. He found a page where a paragraph had been replaced by a stamp, ordered withheld ESSEC. 5. Beneath it, a signature scrawled with the confidence of someone who never expected to be read by anyone but subordinate. Ardeen. C. Marcus stared until the letters freckled. The ink matched the one he'd seen flash on the TV. The surname sat there on the page like a trap, He hadn't seen Lade until he'd stepped into it. His throat tightened in a way training did not address. He took out his phone and snapped a photo even though he wasn't supposed to, the shutter sound muffled by his palm. Footsteps sounded behind him. He closed the binder without actually closing it, hands casual with effort. A librarian with soft shoes passed him by. Marcus exhaled through his nose and reopened the page, gaze fixed and moving at once. He found one more thing, a memo folded into the binder's back cover, as if by accident. Recommendation. Commendation for C. Redacted, for exemplary extraction under adverse conditions. The space where the name should have been was a black bar. In the margin, a faint imprint remained, where a pen had pressed hard enough to leave a ghost beneath the blackout. He tilted the page to the lamp, the way a man peeks into a secret. He could make out the top of a letter, then the curve of an S before the ink swallowed the rest. He imagined the rest of it anyway. Isaiah. He didn't like what imagining felt like. When he left the library, the night had settled all the way. He sat in his car and texted R again. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? No reply came. Instead, a second number, unknown, lit his screen. He let it ring twice and answered. Marcus Dean. The voice was female, clipped, official. This is Records. You filed an inquiry. I'm calling to inform you that certain materials you've requested are restricted. Please withdraw your request. On what grounds, he asked, the words clean as cut glass. On grounds of discretion, she said, which was not a regulation and not a reason, and told him everything. He smiled with half his mouth. So there's something to withdraw. Silence. Then the click of a call ended by someone who did not like being seen. Marcus set the phone down on the console and stared straight ahead. In the windshield's reflection, he saw his face and behind it, faint and superimposed, his last name typed under a signature he wished he didn't recognize. He thought of the recruits, he thought of the morning, he thought of the word fraud, and how it can shift shape when light moves. He started the engine and killed it again, fingers tight on the key. He pictured Isaiah's eyes when he'd said those 6 words. Not cruel, not victorious, just profoundly tired. He picked up the phone, one more time, and opened the photo he'd taken of the signature. He zoomed in until the pixels blurred, and the ink's pressure showed in ridges. He didn't need to zoom to know what he'd found. He did it anyway, because denial is a ritual. Marcus's thumb hovered over his father's contact, then moved to Eli Navarro instead. His text was a single sentence. Meet me at 0600. Don't tell anyone. I found something. The night had offered no rest. Marcus sat in his car with the photo of the signature still glowing on his phone. The black stamp of authority beneath his father's name pressing into his mind like a weight he couldn't shake. He had always admired the Dean legacy. The sharp uniforms framed on the wall at home. The stories told at family gatherings about courage and service. But now the neat edges blurred. If Isaiah Cole's name had been erased, then someone had signed the order. And if that signature belonged to his father, then the myth Marcus had built his life on was carrying rot at its foundation. By dawn, the gym's parking lot was empty, but for 2 cars. Eli Navarro leaned against his, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Marcus approached with a stiffness that wasn't fatigue. It was calculation. You sounded urgent, Eli said, his voice wary. Marcus unlocked his trunk and pulled out a manila folder he'd filled the night before. I found something, he said. Eli's eyes narrowed. About Mr. Cole. Marcus nodded, flipping the folder open across his hood. Pages fluttered in the breeze. Photocopies of old records. Mission logs with redactions. Commendation requests that ended in black ink lines. The paper felt brittle, like it had been bent under too much weight for too long. This is his file, Marcus said. Or what's left of it. Look. Eli scanned the documents. His brows furrowed deeper with every page. Why are there so many gaps? Because someone wanted them there, Marcus said. He tapped one sheet, the one stamped ordered withheld. Sec. 5-7. These missions. He was there. That's him in the footage we saw. But every time his name should appear, it's gone. Eli glanced up. Erased. Marcus nodded. His throat worked before he forced the next words out. By my father. The air thickened between them. Eli set the papers down gently, like they might tear if he pressed too hard. Why would he do that? Marcus stared at the windshield of his car, his reflection fractured by dust. Because he could. Because Cole didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. Black, southern, quiet, easier to give the credit to someone else. Eli exhaled, the sound sharp. So you admit it, Mr. Cole was telling the truth all along. Marcus didn't answer right away. Admitting that out loud would crack something inside him. He wasn't ready to let break. He closed the folder and tucked it under his arm. What I admit is that this doesn't stay hidden anymore. You're going to show everyone? Marcus hesitated. The hesitation betrayed the war inside him. If he revealed the file, it wouldn't just vindicate Isaiah. It would stain the Dean name, his own bloodline, the respect he carried in this gym, in this program, in this city. My father taught me something, Marcus said finally. His voice was low, bitter. He told me our family's strength was built on honor. If he buried a man's career to protect his own, then maybe it's time that lie rots in the light. Eli nodded slowly. Then let's bring it out.
Yes, sir.
That afternoon, the gym buzzed with its usual noise, though under the surface, the air had grown restless. Whispers about Isaiah hadn't stopped since the documentary. Recruits swapped theories in low voices between reps. Some wanted to believe the story, others wanted to dismiss it, and a few feared it might say something about their own futures, that the system they served could erase anyone at will. Isaiah moved through it quietly, his broom and rag marking his presence as much as his silence did. But the looks had changed, no longer simple mockery. They carried curiosity, suspicion, unease. It was the kind of attention that weighed heavier than ridicule. He paused at the edge of the mats, the mop handle still in his hand. For a second he glanced toward the corkboard, where schedules and announcements were posted. An instinct flickered, an old habit from the service. When your name disappears from a list, you learn to check boards more carefully. He turned away before the thought could root itself. At that same moment, Marcus stood in the office, the printer humming as pages slid into the tray. Each sheet was crisp, black letters cutting through white space with a clarity that was hard to argue. He stacked them neatly, punched a hole with the staple, then pulled a piece of tape from the dispenser. His jaw clenched as he carried the papers to the corkboard. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The sound of tape tearing drew a few heads. When the pages flattened against the cork, silence spread like a tide. Recruits drifted closer, their conversations evaporating, as eyes fell on the words. The top page was a mission summary, the one with commendations listed. There were names, clear and bold, and then where Isaiah's should have been. A thick black line, redacted to the point of erasure. The second page showed the stamp, ordered withheld CX5, or Meta Sir. 5.7. Beneath it the signature, R. Dean, CO. Murmurs turned sharp. Some pointed, others shook their heads, others just stared. This is real? One voice asked. Looks official. Why would they hide his name? The questions piled into the air faster than anyone could answer. Across the room, Isaiah set his mop back into the bucket, water dripping softly. His eyes flicked once to the board. He didn't move closer, didn't rush to explain, didn't claim what was his. He only stood straighter, his chest rising with a breath that seemed to carry decades. Chief Briggs arrived mid-stir, his gaze catching the papers instantly. His face hardened. Who posted this? Marcus stepped forward. His voice carried, calm and sharp. I did, because we deserve the truth. Every recruit turned between Isaiah, Marcus, and the old instructor. The air in the gym thickened with a mixture of revelation and danger, like the second before a storm breaks. Isaiah's hands closed around the rim of his bucket. He didn't speak. Not yet. But his silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was the silence of a man who had seen storms before, and knew that when they came, you couldn't outrun them. Chief Briggs ripped one of the papers from the board, his hand trembling as his eyes scanned the signature. Do you have any idea what you've just unleashed? He said, his voice low and unsteady. The recruits stared, caught between fear and curiosity, as the weight of hidden betrayal filled the room. The gym was no longer a gym. It had become a courtroom. The file Marcus taped to the corkboard hung like a verdict, pages fluttering slightly each time the heavy doors opened or shut. Recruits huddled around it in clusters, voices rising and falling, confusion and conviction trading blows in the air. The noise wasn't the usual clatter of plates and banter. It was sharper, angrier, like steel scraping steel. Eli Navarro stood near the front, his eyes darting across every page. This is official, he said, his tone urgent. You don't forge stamps, you don't invent redactions. He turned to the others. This proves it. They cut him out. Nolan scoffed, folding his arms. or it proves nothing. You ever heard of doctored files? People make careers out of conspiracy theories. Eli shook his head. No. This isn't some internet rumor. This. He jabbed his finger at the page. This has a commander's signature. That only deepened the fracture. So what? Ryder chimed in from the back, his smirk tight, defensive. Maybe the guy cleaned barracks and got caught, sneaking into places he didn't belong. Ever think about that? Maybe that's why his name doesn't show up. Because it was never supposed to be there. A murmur of agreement rippled through half the room. The other half shifted uncomfortably, torn between the evidence in front of them and the prejudice stitched deep into their bones. Chief Briggs still stood near the corkboard. The paper he'd torn down crumpled in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the signature. His jaw worked, but no words came out. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Isaiah, meanwhile, leaned against his mop handle at the far end of the room. His silence hadn't changed, but its meaning had. He wasn't invisible anymore. Every conversation was about him. Every whisper traced back to his past. The same men who had mocked him now used his name as a weapon in arguments, either to defend or destroy him. A recruit named Daniels finally spoke up. We owe him an apology. All of us. We treated him like garbage. And the whole time he was, Daniels faltered, searching for words. He was one of the best. Best? Ryder barked a laugh. We don't know that. We just know his name got crossed out. Because someone wanted it crossed out. Daniels shot back. That's speculation, Nolan said firmly. That's racism, Eli snapped, louder than he intended. His voice bounced off the walls, silencing the room for a moment. Eyes turned toward him, some angry, some embarrassed, some startled. Eli swallowed and steadied himself. That's what this is. You can't erase a man's whole career for no reason. You can't take his medals, his missions, his recognition, unless you've decided he doesn't deserve them. And we all know why they decided that. Ryder's jaw clenched, but his smirk slipped. The divide was open now, raw. Some recruits looked down at the floor, shame creeping into their faces. They had thrown towels, spilled drinks, mocked Isaiah's clothes. They had made themselves taller by pressing him smaller. Now they saw the truth standing in front of them, broom in hand, too proud to explain himself. Others dug in deeper, refusing to yield. To admit the truth meant more than saying Isaiah was a SEAL. It meant admitting they had inherited a system that lied, that erased, that rewarded them for things denied to others. That was too much weight for pride to carry. Chief Briggs finally spoke, his voice gravelly. You boys want the truth? I trained Isaiah Cole. I watched him pass every trial. I watched him do things none of you could imagine. And I watched his name vanish from record, the moment he threatened the comfort of the wrong man. The silence that followed was heavy. Even Ryder had no quick comeback. Briggs looked at Isaiah, across the gym, his eyes hard with regret. You didn't deserve what they did to you. Isaiah met his gaze for a brief moment, then looked back at the floor he'd been cleaning. He didn't answer. His silence said enough. The recruits began to splinter. Daniels and two others moved toward Isaiah, shame in their posture. Mr. Cole, Daniels said quietly, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. Isaiah didn't look up. His mop continued its steady path across the floor. The gesture was small, but it was a mercy. Behind them, Marcus stood rigid, his folder under his arm. He hadn't spoken since posting the papers. He hadn't defended Isaiah outright, nor denied him. His war was internal. He had exposed the truth, but the cost was still settling around him like smoke. His father's name was on those documents. His father had built Marcus's entire understanding of honor, and now that honor was poisoned. Look around you, Nolan said suddenly, his voice cutting into the air. You think the Navy's perfect? You think SEALs don't make hard choices? Maybe Cole wasn't good enough, and maybe Briggs is covering for him out of guilt. You ever think about that? The words landed like sparks on dry grass. Some nodded, some bristled, some looked toward Isaiah, waiting for him to break his silence. He didn't. Instead, he dipped his mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and pressed forward, reclaiming the floor one stroke at a time. The sound of water against tile was louder than the voices. The recruits argued in circles, until the doors banged open. Evelyn Grayson, the facility manager, stepped in, her expression strained. She scanned the crowd, then the papers on the corkboard, then Isaiah himself. What is happening here? She demanded. No one answered. The silence was guilty, heavy. Evelyn strode to the board, ripped the papers down, and crumpled them in her fist. You want to fight about Navy politics, do it outside this gym. This is a training ground, not a rumor mill. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed unease. She had seen the signature. She had seen the black bar of redaction. She knew this was bigger than her. She stormed back into her office, the door slamming behind her. The recruits remained frozen, the tension unbroken. Then, slowly, word began to spread beyond the gym. Someone had snapped a photo of the corkboard before Evelyn tore the pages down. It was already on a private chat, already being forwarded, already slipping into places where command couldn't control it. By evening, whispers reached ears far beyond the recruits. A name long buried began surfacing in corners where it was never meant to be spoken again. And somewhere in an office lined with medals and plaques, a higher-ranking SEAL commander set his phone down after hearing the rumor. His expression was unreadable, but his decision was clear. The commander rose from his chair, adjusted his uniform, and said to his aide, "Clear my schedule. I'm visiting that gym tomorrow." Morning light slanted through the high windows of the gym, streaking the floor with pale gold. The recruits were already at work, iron clanging, sweat beading, breath ragged. But beneath the sound of training was something taut and unspoken. The events of the previous day hung in the air like smoke after gunfire. Everyone was waiting for clarity, for punishment, for the next shoe to drop. It arrived in boots. The double doors banged open. A man entered with the kind of presence that made space bend around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform immaculate, his silver bars gleaming beneath the harsh lights. His hair was cut razor short, his jaw tight, his eyes sharp and assessing. Commander Richard Harrington. The recruits stiffened instinctively, the rhythm of their workout breaking. Evelyn Grayson appeared from her office, flustered but trying to mask it. Chief Briggs straightened near the mats, his face unreadable. Harrington's gaze swept the room, cool and clinical. "Who," he demanded, voice hard as steel, "is responsible for spreading these rumors?" No one answered. The only sound was the drip of sweat hitting the mats and the faint squeak of sneakers shifting. "I'll say it again." Harrington's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "Who posted falsified Navy files in this facility?" The recruits glanced at Marcus, but Marcus kept his chin high, his expression blank. Eli shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. No one dared speak. Harrington's gaze finally landed on Isaiah Cole. For a flicker, something broke in the commander's face. His stern expression faltered, his eyes widening just slightly, like he'd seen a ghost. Then, as quickly as it came, the mask slammed back into place. He looked at Isaiah with studied indifference, as if the man was nothing more than a janitor with a mop. "Mr. Cole," Harrington said, voice flat, "step forward." Isaiah didn't move at first. His hand rested on the mop handle, his posture calm, unthreatening. He wasn't a recruit under command anymore. But the silence in the room made it clear. Refusing wasn't an option. Slowly, he stepped forward, his boots quiet on the polished floor. The recruits watched, tense. Some leaned in, hungry for confrontation. Others shifted with unease, knowing the moment carried more weight than they could grasp. Harrington studied Isaiah, his eyes flicking briefly to the collar where the trident tattoo lay hidden. His jaw clenched. "There are allegations that you once served with the teams, that you carried a trident you didn't earn. Do you confirm or deny these allegations?" The room held its breath. Isaiah looked him in the eye. "I confirm nothing. I deny nothing." The answer was deliberate. A refusal to play the game. Murmurs broke out among the recruits. But Harrington raised a hand, and the noise died instantly. He stepped closer, his boots echoing on the tile. "Understand something, Mr. Cole. This facility is not the place for personal myths. You sweep floors. You clean. You do not tell stories that distract my men from their mission." Eli opened his mouth, but Marcus shot him a look that froze the words on his tongue. Isaiah remained still. "I've told no stories." Harrington's eyes narrowed. The truth of that statement was undeniable and dangerous. The commander knew Isaiah hadn't claimed anything, hadn't boasted, hadn't asked for recognition. It was the recruits, the file, the photo, the whispers that had set the fire. But Isaiah's silence had a power of its own, and power was the last thing Harrington could afford him to have. The tension thickened. Briggs finally spoke, his voice gravelly. "With respect, Commander, Cole earned what you're denying. I saw it myself." Harrington's head snapped toward Briggs. His expression hardened. "You will remain silent, Chief." This isn't your concern. Briggs clenched his jaw but obeyed, retreating a step. His silence carried fury. Harrington returned his gaze to Isaiah. For the briefest moment, his voice softened, quiet enough for only Isaiah to hear. You should have stayed gone. The recruits didn't catch it, but Isaiah did. His face betrayed nothing, but his chest tightened with an old familiar weight. Harrington straightened, his voice booming again for all to hear. You don't care what fairy tales circulate here. They end now. Anyone caught spreading rumors will answer directly to me. His eyes swept the recruits, daring them to challenge him. None did. He turned sharply and strode toward Evelyn's office. Mr. Cole, he barked. With me. The gym buzzed with whispers as Isaiah followed him inside. The door shut, and the hum of conversation dulled into anxious silence outside. Inside the office, Harrington's mask dropped. His face hardened with something uglier than command. Fear. He stepped close, lowering his voice to a growl. Do you understand what's at stake here? Isaiah's expression was calm. The truth will get you killed, Harrington hissed. You were erased for a reason. If you dig this up, you don't just bury yourself, you bury men still serving. You bury the institution. Isaiah's silence stretched, his eyes steady, unyielding. Harrington leaned closer, his words cold. You think your life is quiet now? You think pushing a broom makes you invisible? Start talking, and you'll wish you'd stayed invisible. There are people who won't hesitate to make sure you disappear for good this time. Isaiah didn't blink. I've already disappeared, he said quietly. The question is, who made me vanish? The commander's jaw tightened. He grabbed a pen from Evelyn's desk, twirling it between his fingers, as though he needed something to ground his hands. You keep silent, Cole. Or you won't just lose a name in a file, you'll lose what's left of your life. The office door opened suddenly. Eli Navarro stood there, wide-eyed, having overheard the last sentence. The commander's head snapped toward him, and the young recruit froze, realizing too late what he had just stepped into. The office door stood open, Eli Navarro frozen in its frame. His eyes darted from Isaiah to Commander Harrington, the tension in the room so sharp it could cut skin. For a moment, no one moved. Then Isaiah stepped forward, his shadow stretching into the gym beyond. He brushed past Eli gently, the mop bucket left behind, and walked into the center of the floor. The recruits quieted instantly. Even Ryder, even Nolan. The clang of plates stopped mid-air. Conversations died in throats. Everyone could feel it. Something was about to break. Isaiah stood in the middle of the gym, his hands empty, his posture calm but unyielding. He had lived years behind silence, but now words pressed against him like a tide too heavy to resist. For years he began, his voice low, steady, carrying across the space without effort. You've looked at me and seen nothing but a janitor. No one moved. The recruits' faces reflected a mix of shame, curiosity, and disbelief. I didn't correct you, Isaiah continued, because silence has always been my armor. I learned young that when you're black, silence can mean survival. In Mississippi, silence kept me from drawing fire on dirt roads, where laughter turned to slurs and rocks turned to bruises. In the teams, silence kept me alive when some men on my left and right doubted I belonged beside them. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. But silence has a cost. It erases you, piece by piece. Eli swallowed hard, his eyes never leaving Isaiah. Daniel shifted on his feet, guilt-heavy in his expression. Isaiah's voice deepened. I passed every test. I bled on the same sand, drowned in the same surf, carried the same weight. I earned the trident. His hand went to his collar, tugging it down just enough to reveal the ink clearly this time. But some people don't see strength when it comes in dark skin. They see threat, they see inconvenience, and they find ways to make sure history forgets you. A ripple moved through the recruits. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others stiffened, clinging to disbelief. Isaiah's tone softened, but it cut deeper. Every medal I earned was handed to another man. Every mission I led was credited to someone else. My name was removed, my work stolen, my silence demanded. When I left, there was no ceremony, no flag, just emptiness. That's what betrayal looks like when it's written on paper. Chief Briggs's face had gone hard, his hands fists at his sides. He'd lived the training, seen the injustice, but hearing Isaiah name it filled the air with weight. He couldn't lift. Isaiah went on. You asked why I mop floors, why I push a broom instead of living with honor. It's because honor was stripped from me. I chose work no one could take credit for. No officer can sign their name on a cleaned floor. No man can erase my hands from the dirt I sweep. His words fell heavy, steady, each one hammering into the silence. The recruit stared. Ryder, who had mocked him the loudest, found his smirk gone. Nolan's arms were no longer crossed. Daniels's eyes shone wet. Even Marcus, standing stiff near the back, felt the truth gnaw at him. Isaiah looked at them all. You wanted to test me. You wanted me to prove I belonged. But belonging was never mine to claim. It was yours to allow. And when men like you decide someone doesn't belong, you erase him. You mock him. You bury him, while he's still breathing. The gym was silent. Truly silent. No whispers. No clanking iron. No nervous laughter. Just Isaiah's words hanging in the air, undeniable. Eli stepped forward slightly, his voice quiet but trembling. Mr. Cole, I believe you. We all should. Isaiah nodded once, but his eyes held sadness, not triumph. Belief doesn't give me back the years. Belief doesn't bring back the brothers I buried, or the recognition stolen from me. Belief doesn't erase betrayal. The silence in the gym felt holy. A confession no one had been prepared for. Some recruits felt tears sting their eyes, not just for Isaiah, but for the ugliness his truth reflected back at them. Isaiah drew a breath, his voice softer now. I stayed silent because speaking meant danger, because truth threatens power. But if you want to know why I clean these floors, it's because they remind me of something. No matter how many footprints trample them, no matter how dirty they become, you can always see the shine again if you're willing to put in the work. Maybe that's all I am now. A man who makes things clean again. He set his hand on the mop handle leaning nearby. But don't mistake quiet work for weakness. I carried more than any of you know. A tear slid down Daniels's cheek. Nolan looked away, ashamed. Ryder bit his lip, his eyes glassy. For the first time the recruits weren't mocking him. They weren't questioning him. They were listening. And then, a voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. Enough. All heads turned. Commander Harrington had stepped back into the gym, his expression carved from stone. You hear a man tell a story, Harrington said, his voice booming. And suddenly you all think it's gospel. But stories are dangerous. They can be lies dressed in memory, myths dressed in scars. Don't be fooled by emotion. This man, he pointed at Isaiah, is not who he claims to be. Izuku. Gasps rippled. The silence Isaiah had built fractured in an instant. Eli's jaw dropped. Daniels shook his head in protest. Chief Briggs cursed under his breath. The recruits froze between belief and doubt, between shame and fear. Isaiah didn't move. His face was calm, but his silence no longer looked like choice. It looked like resistance. Harrington's voice thundered, final and brutal. Isaiah Cole is a liar. The gym felt like a courtroom in recess, tense but waiting for judgment. Commander Harrington's booming denial, Isaiah Cole is a liar, still echoed in the rafters. The recruits stood caught between belief and doubt, their loyalty to authority warring with the evidence their own eyes had begun to collect. Isaiah, calm as stone, didn't flinch under the accusation. But the silence that followed Harrington's words didn't last long. It began with a phone. Eli Navarro, hands trembling, raised his screen. Sir, that's not true, he said. His voice was young, shaking, but clear. I found something. The recruits turned, curiosity snapping to attention. Harrington's face darkened. What are you talking about? Eli stepped forward, holding out his phone. It was an archived photo from a Navy SEAL alumni site, one that had been quietly preserved by men who remembered what the official record erased. In the grainy image, a younger Isaiah stood in a desert, dust swirling around him. His face was tired but proud, his uniform dirtied by battle, and on his collar, unmistakable, was the trident. Murmurs spread across the gym like wildfire. Some recruits gasped, others cursed under their breath. This isn't the only one, Eli continued, his courage growing. There are more, mission logs, photographs. Retired SEALs have already started speaking online. They remember him. He turned his eyes toward Isaiah. They remember you. Isaiah's shoulders lifted and fell in a slow breath. His silence wasn't denial. It was confirmation. Harrington stepped forward, his voice low. Dangerous. Those are doctored. Anyone can edit a photo. But Chief Briggs had already pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. His hands shook as he opened it. Not these. He spread several black and white photographs across the bench. I kept them. I kept them because I knew this day might come. The recruits leaned in. The images spoke louder than words. Isaiah crawling through mud with a team. Isaiah scaling cliffs with a pack strapped to his shoulders. Isaiah kneeling beside comrades during training exercises. Each photograph told a story, each one undeniable. This, Briggs said, his voice cracking, is Isaiah Cole. One of the toughest men I ever trained, and they tried to erase him. Nolan, who had once mocked Isaiah as just a janitor, pressed his hand to his forehead. God, we treated him like trash. Daniels whispered, we erased him all over again. Just like they did. Harrington's face flushed. Enough. Photographs don't prove anything. Records are sealed for a reason. But the words rang hollow. Already, Eli was scrolling, pulling up a video clip posted by a retired SEAL who had recognized Isaiah when the gym rumors hit social media. The video was shaky, the voice gravelly with age. That man you call a janitor? Isaiah Cole? He carried us when we couldn't carry ourselves. He led missions nobody else had the guts to take. And when command turned its back on him, we knew why. He was better, stronger, and he looked like me, black, in a world that didn't want him there. Don't let them lie to you about him. The recruits stared. The truth wasn't whispered anymore. It was spoken loud enough for the world beyond the gym walls. Isaiah finally lifted his gaze, scanning the faces of the young men before him. His voice was soft, deliberate. I don't need revenge. I don't need medals or applause. All I wanted was peace. To live quietly, without my past used against me. But you've dragged me back here, and now the truth stands whether I claim it or not. Some recruits blinked back tears. Others clenched their fists, angry at themselves. Marcus Dean stared hardest of all. His jaw tight. He had seen the file, seen his father's name on the order that erased Isaiah. The truth had split his loyalty in two, and he couldn't look away. Isaiah continued, his tone heavy with quiet dignity. The men who died alongside me, they are the ones who deserve remembrance. Their names belong on walls. Their stories deserve to be told. I carried their weight then, and I carry it still. That's why I chose silence, because my grief was louder than recognition. The gym was silent. Even Harrington couldn't speak. His authority cracked under the weight of evidence, photographs, and living witnesses. His denial looked smaller by the second. Then Evelyn Grayson, who had been standing near the doorway, stepped forward. In her hand was a folder she had received that morning, one she hadn't dared open, until now. Her face was pale as she extended it. Commander, this came through official channels. Someone leaked it. Harrington snatched it open. His eyes scanned the contents, his jaw clenching tighter with every page. The recruits leaned closer, but it was Isaiah who stepped forward and placed a hand gently on the folder, lowering it. Don't hide it, Isaiah said quietly. Let them see. Evelyn took the folder back and opened it for the recruits. Inside were mission logs, declassified only days earlier by order of an oversight committee. And there, written clear in typewriter ink, was Isaiah Cole's name, listed again and again beside missions that had once been credited to others. His name had survived redaction, pieced together from drafts and backup copies. Proof, undeniable. Gasps filled the gym. Some recruits clapped their hands over their mouths. Others whispered Isaiah's name, as though saying it finally gave it weight. Harrington stumbled a step back. His authority, his denial, collapsed under the weight of ink and memory. He was exposed not just as a man complicit in erasure, but as a coward who had built his power on silence. Isaiah didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply bowed his head slightly, a gesture of quiet relief. The truth always surfaces, no matter how deep you bury it. And then Evelyn pulled out the last item in the folder, a faded photograph. She hesitated, her fingers trembling, before holding it up. The recruits drew closer, eyes widening. The image showed a battlefield dust and smoke, chaos frozen in time. At the center was Isaiah Cole, younger, stronger, carrying a fallen SEAL across his shoulders while holding his rifle in one hand. His face was clenched with pain, sweat, and determination. It was not a pose. It was survival. It was heroism, undeniable. The room went silent again. The kind of silence that meant nothing more could be argued. Cliffhanger. Marcus Dean's voice finally broke the silence. That man on your shoulders was my uncle. The gym had never been this quiet. Not when it opened at dawn. Not during the loudest sets, or the hardest sparring session. Not even when orders barked across the mats, silenced every breath. Now the silence was reverent. It had been a week since Commander Harrington's denial shattered into truth. A week since documents, testimony, and voices from Isaiah's past had surfaced, confirming what the files in Briggs's memory had long declared. Isaiah Cole had been a SEAL, a real one, a fighter, a leader, a survivor, betrayed, erased, but never broken. The recruits who once mocked him now stood in formation, their heads high but their expressions heavy. Each carried the weight of their cruelty, their disbelief, their laughter that once filled this very space. Evelyn Grayson stood near the wall opposite the mats. She had ordered it repainted, stripped bare of the faded plaques that once displayed only the officially remembered. Today, a new bronze plate gleamed there, fixed freshly into the wall. Above it read simple words, "In honor of the fallen, for those who served, even when history forgot them." Beneath those words were names, some familiar, some not. But among them was one etched clearly, finally, without erasure. Isaiah D. Cole. The air was thick with emotion as Chief Briggs stepped forward. His voice cracked but carried with pride. This wall remembers men who bled, who carried burdens none of us could measure. It remembers sacrifice. For too long, one of those names was absent. Today, we correct that. The recruits shifted. Daniels wiped his eyes. Eli's jaw was tight with emotion. Even Marcus, standing slightly apart, stared at the wall as if it reflected something broken and rebuilt inside him. Briggs turned to Isaiah, who stood near his mop and bucket, the tools of labor that had defined him here. But now, they felt small in his shadow. His back was straight, his eyes unreadable, his tattoo faintly visible where his collar sat open. "Cole," Briggs said softly, "we failed you once, but we won't fail you again." And then, in a movement that startled Isaiah more than any insult ever had, the recruits saluted. Every one of them, hands raised sharply, to brows, a gesture not of mockery or forced respect, but of recognition. Isaiah stood still. His eyes glistened but did not spill. His silence, always mentor-stood, now felt like sacred ground. He looked at the wall, at his name carved in permanence, then back at the recruits. For the first time, his lips trembled into something like a smile, small, weary, but real. Then, in a quiet ripple that spread like a tide, the recruits broke formation. Daniels was first. He walked to Isaiah, not meeting his eyes at first, but with steady resolve. He reached for the mop in Isaiah's hand. "You've cleaned long enough, Mr. Cole," Daniels said softly. "Let us do it now." Isaiah hesitated, the handle heavy in his palm. For years it had been his shield, his anchor, the proof of a life rebuilt on quiet dignity. Letting it go felt like stepping into the open air after decades in shadow. One by one, others stepped forward. Eli, Ryder, even Nolan, who had dismissed him the loudest. Their hands joined, not snatching, but offering. A line of men, who once mocked now stood ready to take his place, to shoulder the weight he had carried in silence. Finally, Isaiah released the mop. His hands felt strangely light, empty, but not diminished. The recruits took it, and together they dipped it into the bucket, pressing it to the floor. The sound, the soft, steady sweep of water across tile, echoed through the gym. But this time it wasn't Isaiah's rhythm. It belonged to those who had once trampled over his work without noticing. Isaiah stepped back, watching. His eyes fell again on the wall, on the bronze letters of his name. For years he had avoided recognition, because recognition had always come with a cost. But here, now, it felt different. It wasn't paper that could be redacted, or medals that could be reassigned. It was memory, shared among those who had once doubted him. And memory, once planted, could not be erased. Chief Briggs spoke again, quieter now. "Your silence was never weakness, Cole. It was strength we weren't wise enough to see." Isaiah met his eyes, and for once allowed himself to nod in agreement. The recruits kept mopping. They worked in rhythm, shoulders bent, heads lowered, honoring him in the only language Isaiah had ever spoken in this gym: labor, humility, persistence. At the far end of the room, the bronze plate caught the light, shining brighter as the sun climbed higher. And when Isaiah finally turned to leave the floor, the camera of memory lingered not on his face, but on the back of his neck. The tattoo, once ridiculed, doubted, dismissed, now understood, respected, and permanent. It wasn't just ink, it was survival. It was proof. It was justice carved into skin, just as his name was carved now into bronze. Isaiah walked slowly toward the doors, the faint sound of recruits sweeping behind him, the weight of years falling away step by step. He didn't need to say a word, because now the silence itself told the story. The final shot lingered on the tattoo, as the light touched it. The same mark mocked at the start, now recognized as a symbol of unshakable strength. Here's a natural, emotional call to action that flows seamlessly from a racism injustice story's narration. Too many stories like Isaiah's are buried in silence. But silence only protects injustice. If his fight for dignity moved you, type yes. If you believe truth can't be erased. And subscribe if his story broke your heart.